We are so excited for you all to be joining us on our webinar, What to Do When You Can't Co-Parent. I will be the host today. My name is Nicole. I lead marketing at divorce.com. Again, welcoming everyone to this very important topic that we're going to be discussing in depth today. As far as divorce.com, we are an online platform that offers services for those of you who are going through the divorce process. We will help you with your paperwork. We have mediation services as well to help you and your partner come up with an agreement in a lower conflict way using a neutral third party, specifically focusing on parenting plans, which we'll talk about a little bit later today, and how important it is to get that really right in your agreement. And then finally, we help with the filing of that with the court. So if you have any questions about us and our services, you can check out our website. We also are here with Ginger Gentile. She is the director of Erasing Family and founder and divorce coach at Parental Alienation. I know, Ginger, you have a ton of experience in the topic of co-parenting, specifically when there's some conflict, working through those challenges, and you're also a child of a high conflict divorce. So you're coming at this
Yeah.
from the lens of both working with parents who struggle through this, as well as knowing how the effects can really impact a child. That's all why we're here, right? Is to make
Yeah.
sure that we're thinking about children and trying to do our best as parents to put them first and do what's right so that they're not impacted in a negative way. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the meat of the webinar. We have received a bunch of questions from all of you who are joining us, and we're so excited that you have so many questions on this topic. We are also very interested, as you're hearing some of the recommendations that Ginger has, if you want to put them into the Q&A box down below in your Zoom chat, we'll be monitoring them. We'll have time to address them later on in the webinar. Likely, maybe there's even some questions that we hope to get to that will also address any of the questions that you have on this topic. So without further ado, I want to introduce again Ginger. I'd love to hear from you as it relates to co-parenting and some of the common challenges that come up in a co-parenting situation. What are some of the things in your practice that you're doing right now to help solve issues with co-parenting?
So, Nicole, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad to be partnering with divorce.com. We have a similar mission in different ways, but to make what divorce is awful most of the time.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you would have stayed married. It doesn't have to
right.
be as awful. And what I do in my practice at reversingparentalalienation.com is I really focus on the worst cases. So what I see in my practice are the ones that did not have the framework in place in the beginning or let things go really too long, the conflict, not having the skills to change the conflict. And what I have seen is that the sooner you can get ahead of these things, the better. And the ideal time to get started on this is before the divorce, when you're filing, or even before, finding some common mediator, some therapy. You can do couples therapy to divorce, learning new skills that maybe you should have even learned when you were married, but you didn't, on how
Right.
to talk and communicate with another person who might be high conflict. It's also possible that there's two high conflict people in a relationship who are divorcing. So I
Yeah.
sometimes deal with parents who, they come complaining about the other parent, and they're also, part of the problem. But I think the first thing that I help people do is to see that no problem is 100% external. And even if the other co-parent is 97% of the problem, if we can focus on the 3% that is your responsibility, not your fault, not what to blame for, and learn, accept the situation for what it is, accept that you were married to this person, had beautiful child or children with this person, and then learn these skills on how to have a good co-parenting relationship under very difficult circumstances. This is a wonderful gift to give your child. I just want to frame this for people.
Yeah.
When there is a high conflict ex or exes, they are usually repeating trauma from their child that was unresolved. So if you can end this cycle of trauma, you are freeing your children from repeating this. Because what we see statistically is that children who go through high conflict divorce, they are very likely to go through high conflict divorce themselves and either become a victim of an abusive situation or become the abuser. So if you can show your child a way out by mirroring new behavior, not only are you making your life better, but you are giving a beautiful gift to your child because they will learn how to deal with high conflict people, which are all around us, and the other parents who they're stuck with, just like you're stuck with.
Yeah, and you're so right. That's definitely a mission that we share at divorce.com, where we want to try to change the narrative and change how people go through the divorce process, because that really sets up a tone for life after divorce, and specifically how that's going to impact your child. So again, thank you for being here and helping us learn some of these new skills and understand ourselves a little bit better so that we can really try to amend some of these struggles that we're going through as co-parents. So when you think about common challenges, what are some of those like very frequent things that you see in your
Sure.
practice that come up?
So I think there's a few main ones that I see that relate to co-parenting issues. So the first one is I want to control what goes on in the other parent's house.
Mm,
This is not always from a bad spot. So part of it can be like coercive control, but part of it can be little advice like make sure you leave the house extra early today because there's traffic when you take the kid to school.
right.
Make sure you do this. Is this there? I also see a lot of fighting over possessions, like just a lot of miscommunication around lunch boxes,
Mm,
clothes for school that can really blow up and become huge issues. I have one client who has been fighting over lunch boxes for a year and a half.
wow. That
Um,
is
and
crazy.
then her ex-husband for Christmas gave her a huge box, an Amazon box with a Christmas card, some candy, and like 10 extra lunch boxes,
Oh
right?
my word.
And then she goes, I was so insulted. There's no other choice but to donate all the lunch boxes. I'm like, okay, okay. So your ex is tired of fighting about this. He's like, I'll just give you so many lunch boxes. We'll never fight about this again. And then your response is instead of, so this is important, instead of seeing the olive branch when they're there, instead of rewarding the good behavior when it happens, saying, this is an insult that he bought me 10 lunch boxes. He was probably just like, I don't know what else to do except buy these
Right.
lunch boxes. And we resolved the lunchbox conflict together. Um, and then I think a lot of it too is what parents will react when the other parent is more of the high conflict person who's driving. And high conflict, so we understand the term, means a parent who enjoys, thrives, gets energy from conflict. Because most of us don't like conflict, we're like,
Yeah.
conflict. And some people love it. Like they love seeing people suffer. They love getting into these fights. So what parents will do if that's the other person is they'll do one of two things and both are incorrect. One is they'll become a doormat and try to appease the other person, giving into everything. And the other is fire with fire. And what I want to do in this training is give some people some tips that they can start implementing today on a third path, which is being firm while being polite,
Yep.
being empathetic while really enforcing boundaries and detaching as much as possible from a person who loves conflict.
Yeah. That's so helpful. And it's really interesting to hear you frame it in that way about how people get that energy from high conflict. It
Yeah.
helps to understand, right? And so much of this
Mhm.
is just understanding where the other person is coming from.
Totally.
One question that I wanted to ask is, I know that there's a range of issues that come up post-divorce and co-parenting. Where do you feel like the line is for something that's normal, like common issues that happen for anyone
Yeah.
in a co-parenting situation, versus when it becomes problematic, when there's maybe potential threat or something dangerous could come as a result of continuing on that path? Like, how do people know if they're in a situation that just feels like it's not going in the right direction?
So it's not the nature of the conflict, it's how people are reacting. So again,
Interesting.
if you have a year and a half conflict over lunch boxes, that's a serious issue. Whereas part of what I helped my mom realize is I'm like, well, what's the worst thing? And this is a tool for everybody. What's the worst possible thing if this happens? And she was like, well, my 14-year-old will go without lunch. And I asked, is he a diabetic? Does he need food? Like without food, is he going to go into diabetic shock? Right?
Right.
This is important to ask. And she goes, no. I'm like, okay. So he's a 14-year-old kid who forgets his lunchbox. Dad doesn't want to bring it to him. You decide not to. You're not going to call dad anymore. And your son will eat when he gets home. That's,
Right.
and sometimes we exaggerate the consequences and want to control what's going on in the other parent's house. So I think that it's the reactions, because most of the conflict is 90% of the time when I see it's small things, but that become huge issues that then lawyers get called, custody evaluators get called. So I always tell my parents, you should be very concerned if it's a safety issue, if your child is actually unsafe. This is different from thinking they might be unsafe, worried that they're unsafe, right? But there's an actual
Right.
safety issue. This is important to deal with. And if it's not, it's the other person's house. So if you're
Yeah.
vegan and the other parent feeds them hamburgers, not a safety issue. Kids are not getting food, that is a safety issue.
Right.
And we really need to ask, like, we really need to pick our battles carefully. And a lot of parents spend a lot of time being like, I wish they were a better parent. I wish they parented like me. I wish they did this. And we can't ask people to change their behavior. Now, there's a way that I'll get to on how we can influence their behavior and have a better outcome that we want. But we
Yep.
can't expect people to change their behavior, especially when we're divorced. One of the nice things about divorce is
Right.
now it's a them problem. So one thing I'll bring up right now is a little tip. Let's say there's a problem with the school. Let's say the other parent is always tardy with the kid, always arriving late. Parents like, what should I do? And I'm like, the school should intervene and you can encourage the school, but you should not be bringing that up. Let the natural consequences be there.
Interesting.
You know, and so it's really separating out what is a safety issue. And in that case, yeah, you might need to get very involved. But if it's not a safety issue and it's just I don't like it issue, letting it go.
Right.
And this is something that I find because I work with parents who are suffering from something called parental alienation, where one parent is really actively having a campaign against the other parent.
Yeah.
But I found that the parent doing that will blow small things out of proportion, but so will the parent who's the victim. And
Hmm.
so really letting things go is so important, and really focusing only on like what I need to focus on, right? What's a me problem and what's a problem for my kid. And if we don't like the lunch they're feeding them, if they're a little late, if they don't do the homework the way we want them to do, we're going to let it go.
Yeah, I have a feeling that that's going to be a lot of reframing that people are going to have.
Yeah.
But it does sound like it's a helpful tip that's really going to get people through this in a way that's less
Yeah.
conflict oriented. So
Yeah.
that's good. I'm learning along the way here too. Another question for you. I imagine that as things go on and there's a disagreement and then that breeds some resentment, it can sort of go to a place where it's feeling like it's going off the rails. Is there a way that you have in the past seen success in trying to de-escalate a situation or trying to prevent something from getting very heated or like even more high conflict than it normally is? Any tricks to just keep it a little
Sure.
calmer?
Totally. So this is something I see all the time. And again, I work with really, I wish people found me earlier, but I tend to work with cases that have been going on for years of high conflict,
Mhm.
fighting back and forth. Then it makes the kids usually pick a side. They might
Mm.
pick the stronger side for out of protection, but they
Yeah.
don't, kids avoid conflict at all costs, right? So what's very important for us to know is that if there's ongoing conflict between the parents, it's very hard to have a good relationship with your kid or repair that if it's been damaged.
Right.
So let's start with some first easy tips. When we're communicating, and if there's a lot of conflict, we want to keep all communication in writing.
Yep.
There's a few apps. that people can use? Has divorce.com partnered with a co-parenting app or?
Yeah, we have a partnership with an app called Coparenter. That app is
Okay.
unique in that there's mediation service as an
Mm,
on-demand solution. So not only does it have the calendaring and the ability to record communication and make sure that people are keeping themselves honest with what they
yeah,
agreed to, it's also allowing people to go through that mediation when there is a disagreement, have that third party kind of be
yeah,
the way that they can keep themselves honest that they did agree to this, and then
yeah.
it's recorded in the app. So that's a partner of ours that
I
we
love
see
it.
most.
So I love it. So the idea is we want to stay out of court, but we should always act like we might go back to court and someone's going to read our messages.
Right.
So that's a good filter. Like, does this message make me look good? And if the other person goes off the rails, that's their problem. So we just only focus on our behavior. So the
Yep.
first thing when we get a message, and we really want to avoid phone calls, in-person meetings, these are stressful for everybody. We want to get it onto the app. And this, in your case, co-parenter.
Yep.
Let's say they send an insulting message. Rule one, do we need to respond? A lot of times we don't.
Yeah.
So we can let it go. Now, sometimes this is trickier. There might be insults mixed with information. Like, I hate how irresponsible you are. Laura needs to go to school at 6 p.m., not 5 p.m. on Tuesday for basketball practice. And I know you're going to mess it up again because, you care more about partying than Laura's basketball, right? Now, in that case, we do have to respond because there's some information there. So the way we respond back is one, we're always going to be polite. For those of you listening who have corporate jobs, in a corporate email, you say, I hope this email finds you well. Where you're going to do that. I hope this message finds you well. I hope you're having a nice day. Something bland, but friendly. And by friendly, I mean polite, not overly friendly or concerned, right? We're going to keep this message as short as possible. There's no reason to write any message that's longer than a text message. And I do this with all of my clients, all of my business, all of my moms and dads I work with. And this has changed my life because most people tend to write Bibles in their email. And
Yeah.
one email or one message should be about one topic. And there's multiple topics, those become multiple messages, and you do them one at a time. So you're gonna say, hey, Nicole, I hope this message finds you well. Laura needs to go to basketball at 5 p.m., not 6 p.m. on Wednesday next week. Please let me know by this Friday if you can arrange that or if I should take her. Thank you so much, Ginger. So we're keeping these super short. We're
Yeah.
only focused on information. We're not giving any judgments. We're not giving any opinions.
Yep.
And this is so important. We're also not giving advice. We're not saying, because if you arrange the schedule and take the 405 instead of the 101, you'll be able to get, no, we're not giving any advice. We're not asking people to do anything. And so often parents give away their power by asking. And often when we give advice, the other parent doesn't want to do it, just if they're high conflict, just to spite us. So we're keeping this, very brief, but we're also being, we're putting a boundary there. Let me know by Friday
Yeah.
noon if you can do this. We can also say if it's very high conflict, if I don't hear back from you by Friday at noon, I will do X.
Right.
But we need to give them time to respond, right? But we're never giving advice. This is the one that parents fall into. And I'm going to tell you like a very hard one the client of mine had. She found out her son was in a car accident, who was okay, but in a car accident, and the dad didn't tell her. And she wrote an email saying, hey, next time our son is in a car accident, please let me know. Thank you. And she goes, did I follow the rules? I said, no. There should be no email because that's advice. And if we have to advise someone to be a decent human being, like we just need to accept that that person is incapable of that. And this can be very hard for people because we want to say, you're hurting the kids, you're doing this, and they're not going to listen to us. Now, if you want, I can get into even more advanced technique that I usually save
Yes.
for my
Do so.
clients. Okay. So now a person who's high conflict. Now these techniques work for everybody, high conflict or low conflict, because Nicole, if I had just written you that message, you would have been offended. So I don't have to
No.
go in my mind, is this high conflict or not? You'd probably be like,
Right.
oh, thank God, such a clear, brief message, right? Um,
Right.
but let's say someone's high conflict, they want to feel, and now this also can go for customer service too. So when someone's upset, they can't reason. So when we
Makes
try to
sense. Yeah.
reason with them, big mistake. It's not going to work. What
Yeah.
can we do instead, Nicole? And all the people listening, what we can do is the first thing we show them is that we're there for them and we're there to solve the issue. So we can use something by saying like Nicole, if you wrote to me like, I'm so upset that Laura went to school without her basketball jersey and blah blah blah. I could say, Nicole, thanks for sharing. I value your opinion as Laura's mom. I'm here to find a solution with you as long as it takes. I didn't apologize for the
Yeah.
basketball shirt, but I said, I'm here to find a solution. And for a lot of people, knowing that they're important, or if we're debating about something, I value your opinion. And I'm going to give you another extreme example that I hope parents don't have to deal with. I was working with a mom who had a special needs son, and the son needed to take medicine, and the dad, just as a control issue, and he had admitted this to her,
Mhm.
didn't want to give the son the medicine. And for years, this has been going on. Her writing emails, please give the son the medicine. Why are you doing this? The son needs the medicine. Doctors would get involved. And now they had 50-50 decision making,
Yeah.
which put a pin in that, Nicole, and we'll go back to how we can have the divorce decree and what they can do and
Yeah.
when
I
they
definitely want to ask about that. Yeah.
okay. But they didn't do this. So if you have high conflict and you have joint decision making, this can be a recipe for disaster. If there's 2 equal votes, who's the tiebreaker on this? I
Right.
told her to say, okay, next time, instead of convincing him, just say, I really value your opinion as our son's dad, why he shouldn't give the medicine, why he shouldn't take the medicine. I'm all ears. Please explain it to me. I'd love to learn. A few days later, he said, you know what, I'm going to give him the medicine because he didn't have a reason. He wanted to fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we can show up with empathy too, and then the third part of this story, and this is the hardest, and this is why sometimes people need some extra help, like from an app like divorce.com, from Coparent and the mediators, or from a coach like me,
Mhm.
it has to be done consistently. So the mistake
Yes.
parents make is they'll try this technique and they'll either do it perfectly once or they'll only get it half right. So they'll be very brief and be like, once again, you messed up. Please take Laura to basketball at 6. Love, you know, your, the person you left for your secretary, right? But they're like, it's brief, it's
Right.
informative, and it's like, but it's also insulting, right? So
Right.
people will use it once and then it doesn't work and they say it didn't work, or they'll use it halfway and it doesn't work. We need to be really consistent with this. And if this conflict has been going on for months or years, it might take some time for the other parent to react, and that's normal, but we need to stay consistent. And
Yeah.
that's where having a support system comes in, because it's very
Yeah.
hard. I've seen cases turn around completely with horrible alienation, with horrible co-parenting stuff. They now can go out to dinner together. They can now be like, hey, could we switch weekends? And the other parent's like, yeah, sure. But they were
Interesting.
consistent, and it didn't take a day. It took a few months, but they really followed this even when they didn't get the result they wanted right away. Because
Yeah.
also
We've
this
had
probably went on in the marriage too, right? So you're coming
I'm
off of maybe
sure.
years of this. Yeah.
We actually had a lot of questions around this where
Uh-huh.
things are starting off in a high conflict situation and people are just curious, how do you turn it around? And it sounds like consistency, having a team, right? Having a coach,
Yeah.
having someone to keep you honest. And
Yeah.
it sounds like building a new muscle, right? Like
It is.
that communication skill is a different way of communicating than you've been used to, and getting into that habit of practicing these tips that you're talking about. It seems like for some people, maybe not all,
Yeah.
they'll have some success.
So these techniques are designed for very high conflict people, because everyone says, well, they won't work with my ex. And I'm like, well, did you try it? And are you trying it consistently? And even if we can get a reduction, so maybe you won't be friends, but that's, that's something that's like very helpful for people, right? Now,
Yeah.
let's take a little step back. If we show up to every interaction convinced that it's going to be a bad interaction, we're going to get bad interaction. So we also have to give the other person some grace and celebrate the wins. And also, if they do a good behavior, thank them, be appreciative. So we reward them for the good behavior, because what high conflict people want is to be rewarded for bad behavior. So they fight and we fight more, right? So we don't. So what we want to do is to give them the dopamine hit for the good behavior. We're mirroring for our children how to react, and we're just like not responding as quickly. Sometimes even just, if the court order or what you agreed to is I have 72 hours to respond on hour 71. Take your power back. You can reread the message a few times. You can even have a friend or a coach read it. And this is a new muscle. And a lot of what I teach people I work with are scripts and templates, and they will eventually become your own. But it prevents you from being emotional because you're following a script. And I use this all the time. Now, whenever somebody complains to me about anything, I say something along the lines of, wow, that sounds tough. Anyone in your situation would feel that way. Now, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying I feel that way. And you can say like, oh, because Nicole today said, unfortunately, like her dog was sick. It would be like, oh, Nicole, I'm so sorry your dog's sick. That must be tough. And anyone would be a little frazzled with the dog being sick, right?
Yeah.
But we're not saying I feel sick. I understand. It's totally okay, your behavior. We're just saying that you're normal, and I acknowledge that this is a tough situation. And just by doing that, we calm people down. And so also for all the people out there who are like, wow, Ginger, this sounds like a lot. You can practice these techniques with anybody. Practice them at work, with your friends, with your family members. Someone complains about traffic, be like, wow, yeah, that must be tough to sit through traffic. Anyone would be stressed after that. Right. And that way we incorporate them, and then we can try them on our ex or soon to be ex. But I want to get back to how to prevent this. So when you're using an app like divorce.com to do your divorce filings, I would say for all cases, but especially if you think there's going to be high conflict, make the order that you design super, super clear.
Yeah.
So for example, dad gets kids on Christmas. Dad gets kids every odd year on Christmas, starting at 9 a.m. on the 25th to 5 p.m. on the 25th. Otherwise, you're going to be arguing, what does Christmas Day mean? Does it start at midnight?
Right.
Does it start at 10 a.m., 6 a.m.? So you want to be super clear. And then also you want to, like, if the kids are young, envision what could happen in the future. So you don't have to go back to court for an order. So it can be like, at high school, we'll mediate any changes. At high school, we'll switch to a week on, a week off. Because a lot of parents start with these, like, when they're very young kids, two-day schedules, which can be a little stressful. But when kids are little, it might be important so they keep contact with both parents. That for a teenager is hell.
I know.
So you want to make sure that you do not do this for the rest of their lives. And that's better if you can look towards the future and have some provisions in there, but to be super clear, do not leave anything open to interpretation, because what high conflict people will do is they love gray areas.
Yes.
Because they can fight about it. So you want to be like super clear, almost like you're programming a computer where you have to give every line by line instruction. And then the other big thing is that minimize contact, have school be the pickup and the drop off, not the house.
Yeah.
Like there's like one parent drops off the kid at school and then the next parent picks them up.
Yeah.
And avoid in-person exchanges that your kids hate them too. If you really can't avoid that, it's much better like a neutral spot, like a McDonald's, than the house. I've seen just too much conflict at houses. So
I get that.
Yeah.
Maybe even saying what happens when school is out for that day, right? Like as specific
so
as
school
you can
out,
be.
what happens in the summer, but maybe if there's an activity, the pick and drop off that activity. having a rule that like you can't exchange information in the pickup or have the kids sending information back and forth because you have an app. Like
Right.
now with technology, there's no reason to talk in person. And these things can get better, but we really want to limit contact at the beginning.
Yeah, and just a note on this, we are going to be giving away a free checklist so that you can, if you are going through the divorce process, I know some of the attendees are post-divorce, but for those of you that are going through the process and are thinking through that agreement, we're going to be sending you all this checklist, which will help jog your memory of some of the things that you should be putting in that parenting plan so that you can know the things that you don't know when it comes to not just today and how you're going to be parenting, but also the 5 years, 10 years from now, especially if you have younger children. So be on the lookout for that after the fact. So you were saying something that I wanted to touch on a little bit about the children's involvement and how sometimes they might be maybe the go-between. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that interact and how you can maybe work through that?
Sure. So with the divorces I'm dealing with and the post divorces, I have some, moms and dads who come to me 20 years post divorce
Wow.
who haven't seen their kids for a decade. So I don't want the people on this call to get to that point. Children are weaponized in these high conflict situations. And what most parents want to do is tell their children how what they're seeing or feeling is incorrect. And as I said in the beginning, we can't argue with the person who's upset because they cannot listen to reason. So what we want to do is thank our kids for sharing the feeling. Let them know that any feeling's valid if we want to. We can tell them any feeling's valid. If they're saying in a very upset way, we can also say, but it's important to be polite or to not yell. We can do that. And then we just repeat back what we heard and ask if we understood it correctly. And then we can say, I'm listening. Because a lot of parents jump to apologize, but then they're like, but I didn't really do it. Or then they give like these weird apologies, like, I'm sorry you feel that way, which then kids are like, that's not a real apology. And it isn't. But we can just say, like, I hear you. I feel you. Thanks for sharing. And then you
Yeah.
can also just go into what are some proposals? So we can ask this to the co-parent, to the kids. What are some proposals here? What do you suggest we do? And they might have proposals that we can't do. Like, I want you and mommy to get back together. I never want to talk to you again. So we don't have to do them, but we can say, okay, well, I'm your mom, so I can't not talk to you again. But what I can offer is that when you come over to my house for the first hour, I give you some decompression time. I won't get in your space for an hour and you can just watch TV if you want for an hour and not deal with it, right? Because these moments can be very stressful for kids. So we often want to give them just some decompression time. We're not asking them, stop asking them about the other house.
Yeah.
Now, if they want to bring it up, just be like, oh wow, thanks, be interested. Let them have photos of the other parent up in their room. And just try and just be like, I think sometimes parents forget this. Like, what if someone came to you, Nicole, and said, hey, Nicole, from now on, you're going to spend a week in your apartment and a week in someone else's apartment. You have to bring everything back and forth.
Miserable.
And I say this as someone who's a big proponent of equal shared parenting and co-parenting. And we know that this is best for kids, but acknowledge that this is tough for them. They're juggling
Yeah.
a lot. They're juggling different rules in different homes. So, to just be like, hey, yeah, this is very stressful. And I always tell parents, if you want to apologize for something, you don't know what, you can always say, hey, I'm sorry, mommy and daddy aren't getting along. That must be really tough for you. I'm sorry, mommy and daddy are fighting so much. I'm sorry, mommy and daddy don't know how to deal with this situation right now. And give blanket apologies and not get into this like apologizing for every little thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's super helpful. And I know probably a lot of people have questions around
Yeah.
shielding their children and making sure that, the impact is limited. So that was super helpful. I have another question
Yeah.
along the lines of co-parenting. I hear a lot about parallel parenting as another approach,
Yeah.
particularly in high conflict situations. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is it? Like, how should people be
Sure.
considering that?
So parallel parenting, I don't think it's something the court can declare, but basically co-parenting is the ideal, and co-parenting is like, hey, Nicole, Laura's having problems in math. what do you think about getting her a tutor? You can say, oh, Ginger, I think that's a great idea. Um, should we get like a college tutor or should we use an online program? I'm like, well, I don't know. I think Laura would do better online because she's she can get very tense around people, and you can be like, oh, okay, but and I've heard that the stat, and we have a conversation, right? Oh, we
Yeah.
might disagree, but then we'll come to some sort of agreement, or we'll be like, okay, so let's make sure that we coordinate. So on each of our weeks, Laura gets the tutoring she needs, and and maybe we can have a payment app here, okay? Oh, and you know what? I was good at math. I'll do some like more help with her. And Nicole, could you maybe like talk to the teachers and get some more advice from them? Okay, that's a great co-parenting relationship.
Yeah.
Now, if I say we should get a tutor, and then you say a tutor, really? Just because she's getting a C in math? Wow, you always have to overcomplicate things and just pay for things. It's just a grab to get me money, isn't it? Because all through our marriage, all through the divorce, you're just a money hungry person. And maybe our child, maybe we just love Laura for who she is. So she's not good at math. Oh, but she has to be perfect, right? Because that's who you like. I, this is what my clients deal with.
High conflict situations. Yeah.
In that case, maybe on the app, you say you're getting a tutor and you exchange that information.
Mhm.
And if the other parent then wants to get another tutor, is that a little crazy? Yes. Maybe there's just tutoring during your time. Okay.
Yeah.
But it really means that there are two sets of rules in the other house, and there's almost no communication. And any communication is like putting stuff in schedules and exchanging receipts. And it's not the best situation, but it's better than a lot of fighting.
Yeah.
So
I
it
was just going to
means
ask,
like,
what would be the benefit of choosing to go that route? And it sounds like
no
avoiding all the
fighting.
conflict. Yeah.
Avoiding all the conflict and just being like, okay, I'm a vegan, you serve hamburgers. Because I've had parents say, I want to take my co-parent back to court because they're serving hamburgers. Can you believe it? Like hamburgers for lunch. I'm like, would that be the choice I make? No, this is not a safety issue.
Right.
So we let it go. And there's so much of like wanting to control what goes on in the other parent's house.
Yeah.
Um, and you're divorced. So if you can't have a good co-parenting relationship, it's like parallel parenting is the closest to no contact you can get. But when you are a high conflict couple, you can't really go no contact, unfortunately. And I worked with a woman whose ex-husband was, not physically abusive, but very emotionally abusive, like would send 20 emails a week until she would give in to a point.
Jeez.
And she would often go to like doctor's appointments because she wanted to on his time. And she was allowed to do this, but they would end up in a fight and they would get banned from doctor's offices. And I had to be like with her, I know you want to go to the doctor. In your case, it's better that you both don't go together.
Yeah.
Because it's just so high conflict for the kids, and like they're being exposed to like all this craziness. Like if you get banned from two medical offices, like there's a problem. And like also for your own safety,
Right.
you as a co-parent, this is so important for people who've been in abusive situations, your own co-parent, if they're abusive, you and what do? They lure you back in with, oh, if we go out to lunch, maybe you can see the kid, maybe I'll be nice to you. Don't fall for it, and really just be like only business communication. And by business I mean kid schedules and payments.
Right. Right. Right.
Don't get lured back into the abusive relationship.
Yeah. The theme I'm hearing is there's a lot of changing maybe the behaviors that people had during the marriage,
Yeah,
and how they react, how they're thinking about their dynamic. And it's going to take some work and some effort, but it's worth it if it's shielding the kid from conflict and if it's ultimately leading to outcomes that make sense for the family. So super
totally.
helpful information.
Letting go, accepting and focusing on how you show up. And for a lot of my parents who are going through really tough times, and it's really tough, I'm like, just focus on how you show up, not how the
Yeah.
kids react, not how your ex reacts. If you show up with love and joy and calmness, even if it doesn't go well, you had a major victory.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. So this is all very helpful information. I know you've kind of sprinkled in some stories of clients that you have and some
Yeah.
anecdotes that you've seen. Are there any success stories where you've instituted some of these tips
Mhm.
that you've been telling us along the way and it's worked? Where
Oh
you're
yeah.
seeing like dramatic differences where now all of a sudden they can sit together at a table. I don't know, maybe at a joint. Uh,
I'll tell you the most dramatic one. So just to go back a little, so I started doing this work. I've been involved in this space now. I never thought I would. This was not a life plan for about 12 years. And I started off as a documentary filmmaker. And I made two films about this issue. The last one is called Erasing Family, which people can watch for free on YouTube. And when I was making Erasing Family, which is about healing from parental alienation, what I started to see is that all the parents who were able to rebuild relationships with their kids were following the same patterns. And when I decided to coach, um, um, so when I started to coach, what I was seeing is that like a lot of parents focus on the problem and they want to convince me that their other parent is really bad. I'm like, sure, what can I do? I'm not a judge, right?
right, right.
They want to convince me that I'm a victim, and all this stuff. So what we want to do instead is just like focus on, so when I saw this in the films, because when I made Erasing Family, I interviewed like there's like 5 families that are focused on the film, and some of them reunite, and we see them reuniting in real time. But I also interviewed other families who reunited who didn't make it into the film. And I interviewed families who were still mired in conflict 10, 20 years later. So I could
Wow.
begin to see the patterns. So I just focus on having parents copy what works and trying to keep it super simple. And a lot of what I hear parents say is, well, my case is extreme. And I'm like, these are techniques designed for extreme cases, but can be used for moderate cases too, or to prevent a case from getting worse. Um, and people often think there's like some big secret. And you can have a more detailed strategy, you can have more accountability, but like it's really following these techniques. And then so I'm going to give you like the biggest, I would say most extreme one that I have. I've had a few. I started working with a dad who the mother had tried to run him off the road a few times. The mother got a restraining order against the dad so he couldn't see the daughter, and the restraining order is going to expire. Oh, and the mom is a police officer in New York City. So the dad called the police on the mom when he was run off the road, and the police are like, well, we protect our own.
Right.
Um, and when he contacted me, he was like, I'm gonna go back to court when the restraining order expires and get an order to see my daughter. I said, okay, that's always an option. Let's see if we can get you to see your daughter without using the courts first, because you can always go back to court. And he said, okay,
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot. And we just focused on how he communicated with his ex. And then when the restraining order lifted, how he communicated via text and telephone with his daughter.
Mm.
That's all we did. And regulating his emotions. So when they would try to trigger him on purpose, so he'd react, he stayed calm. The result is he now sees his daughter on a regular basis, talks to her for hours a week on the phone, and has overnights with her. And they did not go back to court.
Wow.
This is just the mom changing her mind. They even have dinner together.
Did not see that coming. Wow.
So that's like that's one of the biggest ones. I also worked with some, and I worked with a lot of parents, because I'm focusing on the ones now that the kids are still under 18 and not the ones who I reunite with their kids are older.
Mhm.
And in those cases, like they really go from messaging, because I often look at how my clients message, from you're taking the kids from me, stop doing that, you're damaging them, why are you doing this, it's so evil, blah blah blah, just let me see the kids.
Mhm.
And they just really use my methods over and over again, and they will see changes after a few months. Like, so one dad went from not seeing 2 teenage boys to now he sees them on a regular basis, he's constantly texting with them. They also play like Xbox remotely when they're not there, and he's gotten the relationship with the co-parents so different that he can now call her up and be like, hey, I have to work this weekend. Can we change weekends? And she'll be like, yeah, sure.
The dream, right?
Yeah. And then another one for the moms. I worked with a mom who, like, the teenage daughter, one day, the dad was like, you're never going to see her again. And I'm just unilaterally ending visitation with you. And the mom didn't want to go back to court. So she worked with me, and we really focused on, instead of pressuring the daughter to come back to see her, to just being supportive of whatever decision the daughter made, and acknowledging that the daughter was really being influenced by the dad. So
Mhm.
the mom, first of all, took her power back as mom. She started showing up at school, and she's like, I don't know anybody. I'm like, we'll find the other moms who don't know anybody and become their friends.
Yep.
Started showing up at medical appointments and being polite. And the daughter said to her, I'm so glad you got along with my stepmom. So just being like, I'm not erasing myself. I'm showing up when
Right.
I can.
Right.
And then she found out that the dad, like, maybe she'll never get back to the 50-50 arrangement she wanted, but for some reason the dad was okay with her taking the daughter on trips. So she just went on like road trips to visit family, like once a month on weekends, and always planning like outings for the daughter. And that was like more acceptable. So
Mhm.
again, did she get back 50% custody? No, but she's seeing her daughter on a regular basis and they have a good relationship. So it's also
Yeah.
being like, okay, I'm going to be a little flexible. Maybe I don't win at everything. So
Yeah.
those are three cases of kids where, like, normally most people think the only answer is going back to court because they're minor children. When your kids are adults, you don't have court as an option. So it's
Right.
all these techniques.
Yeah. So speaking of this is great to hear, and I'm sure motivating for some people who are in this situation. How exactly can parents work with you to get some of these
Sure.
scripts and tips and everything like that?
Yeah. So if they go to reversingparentalalienation.com, they can take a free training that's about 25 minutes long. They can also watch some video testimonials of parents I worked with. So the stories I mentioned, they're on our homepage as video testimonials. And the training's 25 minutes. It goes through a lot of common mistakes people make and best practices to do. And then from there, they have basically three options. One, they can enroll in my roadmap program, which is group coaching. So basically it's a 12-week course called the roadmap, where you get all the skills you need to reunite or stop parental alienation. And it works for adult kids, it works for younger children. And then also, we get on live once a week, and they are recorded if you miss them. And I myself, or other ex-alienated kids who went through this, or parents who reunited, so these are all people who healed their families, will also be there to answer your questions. And we have a forum where you can ask questions 24/7. So it's a way to get a lot of information, but also it really is about healing, because if you're not healed, if you haven't let go of the anger, none of these techniques are going to work. You're always going to find a way to self-sabotage and
Yeah.
repeat the trauma. Then the other way is to work with me one-on-one. I'm very selective with who I work with one-on-one. And I have programs where I work with you for a set period of time. And in that time, I teach you the skills you need and the strategy that's unique for your family. So you're never afraid of making a mistake again. You feel peaceful while you're reuniting. And I also now have a program where I will work with you until you reunite for one set price. So even if it takes a year or two, I'm there with you until you reunite. So you can sign up for both of those programs. So you can sign up for the roadmap at reversingparentalalienation.com. You can start with an audit session. That's one-time session with me. And then from there, we can see if we want to work together, or we can decide just to do that audit session. You can also email me, support@reversingparentalalienation.com, if you want more information. But I'm going to be very clear, that email is just a setup, just to give you the correct link to set up the program. I do not coach over email. So this is only for people who are like, I really just want to work with you one-on-one right away. Let's get on a call, and they're ready to take action. Email me. But if it's with a question, it really has to be through the roadmap program.
Great. Thank you so much. Um, I just want to remind people, I know we kind of have been spitting out a bunch of resources. We will be following up after the webinar, so that you don't have to like be jotting down everything down. We'll make sure you get those links, access to the free resource guide that I mentioned before, a link to Ginger Social, the YouTube channel, as well as divorce.com. So if you're hearing all these things and you're like, oh, that sounds really interesting, we'll try to summarize all of it so it's easily digestible for everyone. Just another housekeeping
Yeah,
note. So I know we have about 10 minutes left and I want to be mindful of time. There were a few questions, as I mentioned before, that people were asking. So I was hoping we could pivot and try to address some of them. We don't have time for all the questions, but
sure.
want to make sure that people are heard. One of the questions that has come up pretty frequently is how people can handle no contact. So they're in a situation that isn't joint and they have been told they're not allowed to see their child. Is there like a starting off tip that you can have to
Sure.
get them to engage in this?
Yeah. So that means they are not allowed to see their child. So first of all, you need to find out exactly what that means. And what I mean by that is in most jurisdictions, even if you're not allowed to see your child, you're allowed to go to the school, talk to the school, get academic records. So if you are allowed, unless it's specifically ordered that you're not, you should do parent-teacher conferences on Zoom. Maybe if you're not in the same room as the co-parent, a lot of schools offer this option. Make sure you get report cards. Make sure you talk to guidance counselors, okay? Then you need to see, like, does it mean that you can't see the kid? Are you allowed a phone call or texting them? And if you have limited contact, because most parents have some contact, focus on making that limited contact as joyful as possible. A lot of parents want to ask why, how can we heal this? I'm like, talk, if you're texting, share funny memes, share funny videos, say, I'm proud of you, love you, no need to respond. Like, keep it very light. Okay. And when you see them, let the child lead, ask, what do you need from me right now? Now this is something more advanced. I can't get into this right now, but you can always send your child love. And a lot of parents think, for a lot of parents who have reunited, they said the first step was realizing they can have a relationship with their kid even if they're not seeing them. And then that kid feels this, you're working on yourself, you're building your best life that brings them back to be a magnet. This is all super hard because you have been traumatized. I don't want to say this is easy. That's why a lot of people need support going through this, but this is the first step. Focus on everything you can do to heal and be the best version you can be. So you are ready when your kid reaches out. So many parents, their kid reaches out to them, they think it's never going to happen. They're not ready.
Hmm.
I had a mom the other day who said her son called her. She goes, oh, it must have been a butt dial. Didn't answer. It was her son calling her to reunite.
Oh,
But she was
wow.
so convinced that it couldn't be. So to always be open to this, right?
Yeah.
And to really work on yourself because they might knock on your door. Are you ready? And so many parents, when they actually look in the mirror, say, you know what, I'm not ready. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid of making a mistake. I'm so sad. I'm so angry. I'm angry at my kid. So this needs to be cleared up before you begin to take action.
Yeah. Great tips. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And we kind of got into this, but there's a lot of questions around the volatile nature of someone and making sure that they have the right tips and tricks to de-escalate a situation. Any like other things you want to share on that topic?
So this is something where like this is where coaching and training comes in because we also have to make sure these are right for your situation. The first rule is never do anything that's going to put you or your kids in danger.
Mhm.
So like if you're like, oh, I know if I show up at the school, they're going to call the cops on me, even though they can, maybe don't show up at the school. So you have to think about what's appropriate in your conversation. But if we're talking about normal range stuff, detachment an attitude of not caring so much. Because if you say, I need to see my kids, which is normal, the other
Mhm.
parent knows they have power. So we want to be cool and really focus on our own emotional regulation. And then letting the other person speak, acknowledging them, showing up with kindness and empathy, but then also not becoming a doormat. This is a tight walk that takes some practice to learn. So
Yeah,
I can give those general tips, but that's something where there's a reason why I coach and have a course.
sure.
Because
Yeah, of
also,
course.
and also like, if you're two high conflict people, the way I'd recommend getting out of that is different than
Mm,
you're a victim of emotional abuse. Because often
right.
those cases, what my clients, my moms and dads will do, if they're the victim of emotional abuse, they will actually give the person way too much slack and be like chatting with them all the time. And I have to be like, you need to pull back because this person's abusing you.
Yeah,
So I think in general, less contact is better. And when you have to, it's like just the facts. And remember, you can't control their behavior. A lot
right.
of people want to say, how can I get the other person to change? You change and then their reaction changes.
Yeah. That has been the theme of everything we've talked about is
Totally.
the amount of work that we have to do with ourselves to make sure that we're making the change that we need to get the results that we want.
And when you're using divorce.com to create your agreement, or sometimes people go back for agreements later on, right?
Yeah.
So remember that clarity, 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 and making it so it's like very easy to enforce.
Yes. Yeah.
It needs to
Get
be
rid of the gray area.
clear. No gray, no gray.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the theme. No gray.
Yeah, yeah, no gray.
Okay, well, we are coming up at time, so I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing so many of your tips. I learned so much. I'm a parent myself, and unfortunately, I actually have a stepchild with a high conflict situation, so I'm applying some
Oh, okay.
into our own lives. So I've really appreciated you sharing this, and I'm sure everyone else who's watching has also enjoyed that. As a reminder, we're going to be sending out the webinar after the fact via email so that you can watch the full recording, play back any of the tips that you heard that you're like, I just want to understand that a little bit better. We're also going to be sharing all the resources, links to them, contact information, so that you can either, check out Ginger's coaching techniques or divorce.com's mediation services and parenting plan. And then ultimately, you can always reach out to us on social as well. And we definitely would love to have you join our communities. You can join us on social at divorce.dot.com. And then for Ginger, you can join the at Erasing Family on the social handles. So we will put all that information in an email. We have appreciated all of you joining, your participation, the questions that you've asked ahead of time and during the webinar itself. And again, especially for you, Ginger, for sharing all your wisdom and giving us all the tips and tricks to be able to work through these challenging situations and hopefully make it a little less painful and a little bit better for our children.
Well, thank you for having me, Nicole, and the whole divorce.com team. And I encourage everybody to reach out to me on social and through the website. Just remember, I do not coach over email or chat because I need to know all the information. We need to enter a coaching agreement. And if you're just like curious about what it's like to work with me, sign up for the roadmap. That's easy, it's accessible, and you can just sign up online on my website. And yeah, and remember, this is a tough time. So don't beat
Yeah.
yourself up. Take some time for self-care. But there are now so many tools out there like divorce.com, the Coparent app, the resources I provide too on social media, that it doesn't have to be awful. Divorce is never fun, but it doesn't have to be awful. It can be okay. That's a big thing.
Yeah,
It's okay.
that's the aim. That's the aim
Same.
of
Yeah.
both of our missions. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
everyone who attended, and be on the lookout for a follow-up from us with all the details. Thanks, everyone.